Hello everyone. Our topic is all about 1973 constitutional authoritarianism. In 1965, Ferdinand E. Marcos was elected president, and in 1967, Philippine Congress passed a resolution calling for a constitutional convention to change the 1935 constitution. Marcos won the re-election in 1969 in a bid boosted by campaign overspending and use of government funds. Election of the delegates to the Constitutional Convention were held on November 20, 1970, and the convention began formally on June 1, 1971, with former President Carlos P. Garca being elected as a convention. Unfortunately, he died and was Noong 1965, si Ferdinand E. Marcos ay nahalal na Pangulo at noong 1967, ang Kongreso ng Pilipinas ay nagpasa ng isang resolusyon na nananawagan para sa isang konstitusyonal na imbensyon upang baguhin ang 1935 Constitution. Nanalo si Marcos sa muling halala noong 1969 sa isang bid na pinalakas sa sobrang paggastos ng kampanya at paggamit ng pondo ng gobyerno. Ang mga halala ng mga delegado sa Constitutional Convention ay ginanap noong Nobyembre 20, 1973. Ito convention ay nagsimula ng formal noong Hunyo 1, 1971, kung saan si dating Pangulong Carlos P. Garcia ay inihalal bilang convention. Sa kasamang palad, siya ay namatay at hinalinhan na isa pang dating Pangulo, si Diosdado Macapagal. Before the convention finished its works, martial law was declared. Marcos cited a growing communist insurgency as reason for the martial law, which was provided for in the 1935 Constitution. So, dati kasi noong 1935 Constitution, pwedeng 8 years, 4 years, tapos re-elected by another 4 years term. So, bali 8 years. Kaya, ang ginawa ni Marcos, nag-ano sila ng Constitutional Convention para magbago ng Constitution. So, pagkatapos mapatalsik ni Marcos sa kapangyarihan sa ilalim ni dating Pangulong Corazon Aquino, ay pinalitan ang Saligang Batas na 1987. Ang Saligang Batas ng Pilipinas noong 1973 na pinagtibay ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos, ito ang pumalit sa Saligang Batas ng Pilipinas ng 1935. Some delegates of the ongoing Constitutional Convention were placed behind the bars and others sent into hiding or were voluntarily exiled. With Marcos as dictator, the erections of the convention turned with accounts that the president named dictated some provisions of the Constitution, manipulating the documents to be able to hold on to power as long as he could. So on November 29, 1972, the convention approved its proposed the Constitution. The Constitution was supposed to introduce a parliamentary-style government where legislative power was vested in a unicameral National Assembly, with members being elected to a 6-year term. The president was to be elected as the symbolic and ceremonial head of state chosen from the members of the National Assembly. The president would serve a 6-year term and could be re-elected to an unlimited number of terms. Executive power was relegated to the Prime Minister, who was also the head of governments and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, who was also to be elected from the National Assembly.
So, this is our part 2 of our report, the 1973 Constitutional Authoritarianism. So, President Marcos issued President Decree number 73 setting the date of the possibility to ratify or reject the postponed constitution on November 30 of 1973. So, nilabas ni Marcos yung Decree number of 73 upang katibayan ba or tanggalin yung imungkahing konstitusyon noong November 30, 1973. So this specificity was postponed later and since Marcos feared that public might vote to reject the constitution. Instead of specificity, citizen assembly were held from 10 to 15 January of 1970, where the citizens coming together and voting by hand decide or whether to ratify the constitution, suspend the convenience of the International Assembly, or continue the martial law or place the moratorium election for the period of at least several years. So, nagsama-sama yung publiko upang bumoto if kung agree ba sila o hindi sa Constitution of 1973 ni President Marcos. So, upang mag-continue yung martial law at malagay yung mga memorandum sa mga halaan sa loob ng mga hindi pababa na mga ilang taon. So, the President on 17 January 1973 issued the proclamation announcing that the present constitution had been ratified or overwhelming vote of the members of the highly irregular citizens. So, noong January 17, 1973 ay inilabas ng isang proklamasyon ng pahayag na mga imungkahing konstitusyon ay nakaratipikahan sa mga pamagitan ng makaparaming boto ng mga membro ng lubos na hindi ito irregular na assembly ng mga mamayan. So next, the constitution was amended several times. In 1976, Citizen Assembly once again decides to allow the constitution of March and as well approve that amendments that entrin bansang bansa to substitute to entrin National Assembly. The President to also become a Prime Minister and continue to exercise legislative power until the martial law was lifted and authorized on an emergency basis. So, overwhelming majority will ratify the facility in 1980 retirement age of member of extended of to 70 years. So, in 1981, the parliamentary system was formally modified the French style semi-presidential system where was restored to presidential who was once again to directly elected. An executive committee was to be created composed of the Prime Minister and 14 others. The several president cabinet. The electoral reforms were introduced in 1984. The executive abolished and the position of the vice president was restored. So ang constitution ay binabago ng ilang beses noong 1976. At muli itong napasya ng mga citizens assemblies na ito ay pinatulutan ng magpatuloy ng martial law at ibabarahan ng mga pagbabago. Ang interim pamansa ay binago ng International Assembly. So, ang Pangulo ay maging punong ministro at ito ay patuloy na gamitin ang pangyarihan pangbatas hanggang sa martial law. So, inalis ang batas ng panuntulan ng isang emergency basis at ang isang nakaparaming memorya ay higit na pagtibayin. So, noong 1980, ang mga edad ng mga tao dati ay binago at ito ay pinawig ng 70 years na tao, 70 years. So, noong 1981, ang sistemang parlamentaryo ay formal na binago ng isang stilyong French. So, at semi-presidential ng sistema kung saan ito ay binalik sa Pangulo na ang sandaling muli ay direktang ihala ng isang executive committee at dapat likahin ng binubuo ng punong ministro na at 14 ng iba pa. So ito ay isang silbing kabinete ng Pangulo. So ang reforma sa electoral ng pagsimula noong 1984 ay nalis ng executive committee at naibalik yung posisyon ng bilang vice president. So, after all the amendments introduced, the 1973 Constitution was merely a way from the President to keep the executive powers, abolish the Senate, and by any means, never act as a primary system, instead functioned as an authoritarian presidential system, With all real power, the hands of the President will be backing of the Constitution. So, matapos ang lahat ng mga susunod na pinakilala, ang Constitution ng 1973 ay isang paraan lamang para manatili ang Pangulong na kapangyarihan. So tanggalin ang Senado at anumang paraan hindi kinalaman ng kumilos bilang sistemang kaparlamentaryo. So, ang halip na gumala bilang isang authoritarian na sistema na ang lahat ng tunay na pangyarihan ay puro sa kamay ng mga pangulo. At ito ay sumusuporta sa Constitution.
The situation in the 1980s has been very turbulent as Marcos amassed power. Discontent has also been burgeoning. The tide turned swiftly when in August 1983, Benigno Aquino Jr., opposite leader and regarded as the most credible alternative to President Marcos, was assassinated while under military escort immediately after his return from exile in the United States. So dito, ang sitwasyon noong 1980s ay napakagulo dahil habang nag-iipon ng kapangyarihan si Marcos, umusbong din ang kawalang kasiyahan. So mabilis na umikot ang alon na noong Agosto 1983, si Benigno Aquino Jr., pinuno ng oposisyon at itinuring na pinakakapaniwalang alternatibo kay Pangulong Marcos ay pinaslang habang nasa ilalim ng escort ng militar, kaagad pagkatapos ng kanyang pagbalik mula sa pagkatapon sa Estados Unidos. There was widespread suspicion that the order to assassinate Aquino came from the top levels of the government and the military. This event caused the coming together of the nonviolent opposition against the Marcos authoritarian regime. Marcos was then forced to hold snap election a year early, and said elections were marred by widespread fraud. So dito naman is laganap na ang hinala na ang mga nag-utos na paslangin si Aquino ay nagmula sa mataas na antas ng gobyerno at militar. Ang kaganapang ito ay naging sanhi ng pagsasama-sama ng hindi marahas na posisyon laban sa authoritarian na remeheng Marcos. Napilitan si Marcos na magsagawa ng snap election sa isang taon ng maaga at sinabing ang halalan ay nabahiran ng malawakang pandaraya. Marcos declared himself winner despite international condemnation and nationwide protest. A small group of military rebels attempted to stage a coup but failed. However, this triggered what came to be known as the EDSA People Power Revolution of 1986, as people from all walks of life spilled onto the street. Idineklara ni Marcos ang kanyang sarili na nagwagi sa kabila ng international na kondena at mga protesta sa buong bansa. Isang maliit na grupo ng rebeldeng militar ang nagtangkang magsagawa ng kudeta, ngunit nabigo. Gayunpaman, nag-trigger ito sa naging kilala bilang EDSA People Power Revolution ng 1986, habang ang mga tao mula sa lahat ng antas ng pamumuhay ay dumaloy sa mga lansangan. Under pressure from the United States of America, who used to support Marcos in his martial law, the Marcos family fled into exile. His opponent in the snap elections, Benigno Aquino Jr.'s widow, Corazon Aquino, was installed as president on February 25, 1986. Sa ilalim ng presyon mula sa Estados Unidos ng Amerika na dating sumusuporta kay Marcos at sa kanyang batas militar, ang pamilya Marcos ay tumakas sa pagpapatapon ang kanyang kalaban sa snap elections. Ang byuda ni Benigno Aquino Jr. na si Corazon Aquino ay inuluklok bilang Pangulo noong Pebrero 25, 1986.